And welcome to the Cardinals Nest here on HBC TV 25, the sports show devoted exclusively to St. Mary's University and its athletic programs. I'm Dean Beckman, joined by Sports Information Director Donnie Netto. Johnny, welcome to another Cardinals Nest. And today, a little bit later on, we'll be welcoming in Greg Moore. Greg is the assistant women's hockey coach, so we'll focus on women's hockey, which is coming off of a big win this past weekend over Gustavus.
Yeah, when Greg gets on here, I'm sure he's going to have a broad smile on his face because that was a huge win over Gustavus and really kept them in the playoff hunt. And I know that Greg's been checking the standings and the scenarios that are going to needed to happen for them to make the playoffs, but they're having a good end of the season. They're kind of getting everything going in the right direction, so it'll be nice to have Greg on. Not talking golf this time,
right.
But talking women's hockey.
Yeah, he was on earlier in the year in the fall. He's the head coach for the women's and men's golf teams as well. And also a little bit later on here on the Cardinals Nest, Nathan Voller will put women's softball player Katie Krull in the student athlete spotlight. So that's later on here on the Cardinals Nest. But first, Donnie, it was a big weekend for women's basketball as the team secured a playoff berth once again in the MIAC conference.
Yeah, great performance by them up at St. Ben's. You know, we always talk about how difficult it is to play on the road, and for them to come up with a big win against the Blazers was really good to see. Locks up that playoff position. They're still tied for first in the conference at 12-2, and so there's still a lot to play for. But I know that for Coach Pollerai, it's nice to get that first step taken care of, and that is getting into the playoffs. And as we've talked many times on this show, that's the important thing, is to get into the playoffs. Next step for the Cardinals certainly will be to finish in the top 4 so that they can secure a home court a playoff game, and then hopefully in the top 2 where they can get a bye, and then that top 1 to get the conference championship. So still a lot to play for in these last 4 games, and I know the road's going to be very tough. We talked, Coach Pollard and I talked yesterday. They've got a big game against Bethel, and then they host St. Olaf on Saturday, and then it's Hamlin and St. Thomas to close out the regular season. So 4 very, very important games, some very tough opponents, and hopefully the Cardinals can just keep it going. Coach Pollerai seems to find different ways to win games every time they're on the court, and they're going to have to work some more magic in this last week and a half.
And Donnie, of course, Brandy Blattner, leading scorer, leading rebounder for the Cardinals. In fact, the leading rebounder in the conference. She's out now for the season, most likely with a medical procedure, and so they've had to adjust. Now they've won the games without her now, and so other players are stepping up, including Michaela Meredith, who was named Athlete of the Week in the conference. And so you're right, Coach Pollerai finding a way to make it all work even without Brandy.
Yeah, I think it's tough to lose a player who's averaging a double-double every time she steps on the court. But as this team has constantly talked about all year, this is a team. And Brandy is a piece of that team. And, it's unfortunate that she had an appendicitis and had an appendectomy, but, those things happen. So Michaela and Bridget and the rest of the crew are really just kind of picking up the slack and doing what they can. But you're right, anytime you take somebody like that out of the lineup, it makes it that much more difficult. So, more credit to this team and what they're continuing to do in that they continue to find ways to be victorious. And when the seniors are honored, there's 3 graduating seniors this year in Haley Traum and Bridget Pethke and Michaela Meredith. They're going to leave St. Mary's as probably the all-time winningest 4-year. Their careers here are going to be the best that St. Mary's has ever seen, and for that to take place is pretty impressive. And they've got 82 wins as a senior class, and that's a lot of wins when you think about it. Not to mention a conference championship and an NCAA appearance.
And that's Saturday against St. Olaf.
Yeah,
that
Saturday against
right?
St. Olaf. And we talk all the time about senior days, and we can talk to Greg about it a little bit in the second segment. It's kind of a bittersweet time because you're happy for them to be seniors and to honor them the way they should be honored, but then they're leaving, and that's always it's always tough to say goodbye to a senior class, and it's kind of that time of the year for all of our sports here, and so we'll go through several senior days in the next 2 weeks, and I have to say goodbye to some outstanding individuals.
Yeah, men's basketball will be one of them as well, and they're coming off of a huge road win, kind of an upset win at Concordia, so their terrific play continues. and getting some contributions from those they expect to get, and sometimes even the unexpected, especially there at Concordia.
Yeah, absolutely. A big win. I think Coach Rustover would say, well, we expected to win, and they do expect to win every game. But when you have to drive all the way to Moorhead, and we talk about it with every sport, it's a tough road trip, and for them to come away with a win that not only broke their 2-game losing streak, but also kept Concordia from getting into clinching a spot in the conference playoffs. Broke a 9-game losing streak against the Cobbers. So there was a lot of positive things that happened out of that game, and like you said, it's just to win on the road in the conference is so difficult, and for them to go all the way to Concordia, a team that's vying for a conference berth, playoff berth, a big win for the Cardinals, and like you said, some great performances from a lot of different people, and one that I think we need to mention is James Cullen. He really came through. 3 3-pointers in that game, 2 of them in the second half when St. Mary's rallied from a 9-point deficit. So yes, Quashington Smith-Pugh is doing his part, Will Swigham's doing his part, Connor Kaiser's doing his part, but they're also getting important minutes and important offensive contributions from a number of different people.
And Donnie, I had a chance to see them in their previous game against St. John's, which was a home game, and even though they lost that game 89-80, Smith-Pugh dominated that game offensively. I mean, he is a really impressive player, and really throughout that team, it was an impressive offensive performance by everyone on the Cardinals. St. John's, they just have so many go-to players. They were able to outscore the Cardinals on that day, but St. Mary's hung right with them.
Well, and the thing with the St. John's game is, the score said it was a 9-point deficit, but you look at the way the Cardinals played in that game, and really the first half was the telling tale in that St. Mary's shot 50% from the field and was down by 14 at halftime. Right. It's hard to stop a team like St. John's when they're shooting 75% from the field and knocking down threes left and right. So I gave a lot of credit to the Cardinals for continuing to battle, and that's what they've done all year, is they continue to every single time. Every game is a battle from start to finish. Doesn't matter if they're down by 10, down by 15, down by 14 at the half against St. John's. They're going to make a game of it, and they're going to find a way to do their part to make it a battle right to the end. And they did that again against Concordia. They're down by 9 with a second half to go, and yet here they are at the end. They're coming away with a 1-point win. They're finding ways to get the job done in the end.
Right. Well, Donnie, track and field, Niels went back to his hometown, Decorah, Iowa. It was the Luther Invitational, and Cardinals doing very well there for Niels.
Yeah, no question.
Kind of a nice homecoming for him.
Absolutely. And I know that, we've talked a lot about the guys, and I think you look at the women, and Becca Dupe has done a great job, and she picked up 2 first-place finishes for the Cardinals, including one in the long jump in the first time that she's competitively competed in that event. So great to see that from her, and the guys just continue to do great things. Morris Dennis, school record in the 600, and he and James Davis are kind of the go-to guys in terms of the sprints and the middle distance right now, and they're doing great things. And I know Coach Anderson's talking about this week kind of being a little less kind of a scaled back performance this weekend at Carleton, as they start to gear up for the MIC championships, which really are hard to believe, but right around the corner, and they'll begin to start really preparing to get going for the MIC championships.
And Donnie, Maria Mizzarelli, another first-place finish in the pole vault. I mean, she has been fantastic in that sport.
Yeah, she really has, and really, it's really no surprise this year. She's coming off of a great year last year in the pole vault, and she's continuing to, she really picked up right where she left off last year, and is by far one of the best pole vaulters in the conference right now. So
yeah, 3.05 meters is what she cleared.
It's going to be exciting to see what she can do as we head into the indoor championships.
Yep, absolutely. Donnie, it was a busy weekend for tennis, men's tennis especially. They won 3 of 4 this past weekend.
Yeah, you head over to Wisconsin, and the Cardinals did a great job. They picked up 3 wins. The only loss was to Carthage, a regionally ranked opponent. So it wasn't necessarily you don't want to say a good loss, but it was against an incredibly talented team. Pick up 2 7-2 wins and an 8-1 win. So Cardinals are doing very well as they gear up for them. They get this weekend off because the women now have their busy weekend this weekend with 3 matches all at home, but the men will have a pair of matches next weekend at home as well. So it's a time for them to rest a little bit, recoup from a good 3-1 weekend, and then get ready for next weekend.
Right. And Donnie, in swimming and diving, the MIAC Championships coming up shortly here. So there was one final tune-up. Tell us how that went.
Yeah, very well. I'd say that it was a very good tune-up for them. As on the women's side, you look at somebody like Reese Gillespie, who competed in 4 events at the Minnesota Challenge and did very well. Grace Van Beest looks like she's just going to be in perfect form heading into the conference championships. Joe Tonda has been the workhorse for the Cardinals all year on the men's side, and hopefully that can continue as they head into the conference championships. They'll taper this week with no competitions, and hopefully be ready for the conference championships next weekend.
Yep. And finally, Donnie, before we bring in Greg Moore from the women's hockey team, want to touch on men's hockey. They split with Gustavus this past weekend, and now going into their final weekend of action already.
Yeah, it's kind of funny when you talk about a split with Gustavus. You'd think that the strength of the Cardinals is winning on their home ice, and yet last weekend against Gustavus, it was the road teams that both won, with St. Mary's winning 4-1 at Gustavus, and then Gustavus turning the tables with a 5-2 win on Saturday at the St. Mary's Ice Arena. You know, you certainly are happy with the 4-1 win. I know Coach Moore wasn't as happy with the 5-2 loss. It was a game that they actually dominated in shots on goal, but couldn't come up with the victory. Nick Albergo, Jay Heinley both had a couple of goals. Nick's both coming in the 4-1 win, and Jay's both coming in the 5-2 loss. So we talk about it a lot, but what Jay Heinley is doing is just phenomenal. To go from not scoring a goal in a year to having 16 this year is just it's just outstanding, and it's good to see. A great kid, and I'm very happy for him. Same with Nick, for him to get a 2-goal game, his second of the year. Nice to see him really kind of come around and contribute offensively. He's having a great season, and doesn't necessarily get all the accolades he may deserve, because it's certainly deserving. He's having an outstanding year.
Absolutely. All right. And if it seems like they're ending a little bit early for men's hockey, they're really not. They just happen to have that last weekend off as their bye week, as it turns out.
Yeah, it's going to be It's going to be tough because St. Mary's is going to need to come up with a couple of wins against St. John's, and then they've got to sit back and wait and see, because all the other schools will be playing in that final weekend, and so the Cardinals can do what they can do, but they're certainly going to need a little help on the end and do a little scoreboard watching that last weekend.
All right, when we come back here on the Cardinals Nest, we'll tell you more about that big win for the women's hockey team as we bring in Greg Moore, the assistant coach. That's next here on HBC TV 25.
Want the latest news on St. Mary's University athletics? Watch the Cardinals Nest on HBC TV 25. Dean Beckman and SMU Sports Information Director Donnie Netto will talk about the past week in Cardinal athletics, highlighting the best in each Cardinal sports team. Player and coach guests will add their stories and insight each week with new shows Thursdays at 5 p.m. and replays Fridays at 6:30 p.m. and Saturdays at 7:30 a.m. on HBC TV 25.
And we're back here on the Cardinals Nest on HBC. Dean Beckman, Donnie Netto, the Sports Information Director for St. Mary's, and Greg Moore, Assistant Women's Hockey Coach, joining us now. And Greg, of course, you were on in the fall with men's and women's golf, now back for hockey. If you just add one more sport, we could get you a permanent perch right here on the Cardinals Nest.
Hey, anything to get me sitting next to you, Dean.
And so women's hockey, Donnie and I alluded to it, big win over Gustavus. The last time the Cardinals had beaten Gustavus was 2003. Now, by my mental calculations, which are often incorrect, I figure some of the players on this year's team might have been around 5 years old.
Yeah, it's. I think Donnie and I were doing the math on Monday after we got back in from the weekend, and we kind of figured they were around eight or nine. We're thinking somewhere in then. But I mean, with some of them being 21, 22 years old, that's 13 years ago. It's been a while. It's been a long time, that's for sure.
And Greg, even though they may have been that age when the last time, they all knew the importance of that win and what it says for the program, but really for this team as well.
Yes, I mean it's for goods and bads, it's been a very roller coaster of a ride this year, for more so than any others. We know we have the talent, we know we have the skill to be a contender in the conference, and it's trying to find that consistent effort, day in and day out. And, it kind of stinks that we're kind of finding that this late in the season where we've already kind of dug ourselves a little bit of a hole to get out of. But it's nice to see us kind of trying to fight back and put us in that playoff picture. So that's, in the end, that's the whole goal is, you get in the top 5, you make playoffs, and then from there it's a new season and anything can happen.
So Greg, I want to get to that playoff picture in a little bit, but I think one thing that gets lost in that win over Gustavus is the fact that you almost had 2 wins over Gustavus this past weekend, losing at home on the Friday night game in overtime, 3-2.
Yeah, again, it's a very similar story. Didn't start out that great. The first period was kind of a rocky. We were chasing a whole lot, kind of more intimidated by the idea of Gustavus. Like Donnie alluded to, all our kids know about Gustavus. They played them for the past, 3-4 years, and they know what Gustavus is all about, and they know their kind of historical power in the conference. So I think we were very intimidated upon the name and not so much upon the team. So we came out in the first period in both games, threw the puck around a little bit. We chased a little bit, very much playing fearful of Gustavus, and it showed in our scores. We were lucky to go into the first period in both games tied on Friday night 1-1 and on Saturday 0-0. And from there, it just, we kept building up our confidence throughout the entire game, and by the third period, we were firing on all cylinders. We thought we matched their intensity step for step and made it a very close hockey game. And getting a game-tying goal from Jane Hanula on Friday night was huge. And, getting the 2-0 lead at the end of 2 on Saturday was huge too. I don't know the last time we've gone into Gustavus with a lead going into any period. So it was a lot of fun. And, we got a lot of response from old alums, talking about the importance of Gustavus and how happy they were for us to finally get a win after, 13 years. So it was a fun weekend. But, I think, it's as fun as it was to beat Gustavus, we finally reached the caliber of team that we have. I hope they realize it too, because, it's no secret to us. We have all the confidence in the world that we are one of the top 3 teams in the MIAC, but, we just need to prove it. And I think this weekend we finally kind of stepped it up a notch and finally proved it.
Greg, we've talked a lot throughout the year about Jamie Henderson, McKenna Parent, and Cassie Lean. I think the one that's really starting to really pick up her game and kind of make a name for herself is Jane Hanula. She had 2 goals this weekend against Gustavus. Talk a little bit about her and what she brings to the team and what her role has become.
Early on, Donnie and I, we talk about this all the time, but through our first half of the season, we had very little scoring depth. We would get goals out of our first line, which was McKenna Parent, Jamie Henderson, and Cassie Lean, but that's all they would come from. So right after Christmas, we switched up lines a little bit, and you talk about Jane Hanula. Jane Hanula is kind of your definition of reliable player. She does exactly what you tell her to, and she doesn't sway one way or the other. Not really a person we kind of count on for that offensive prowess, but somebody who puts herself in good positions, and she definitely capitalized on 2 very, very big goals this weekend. You talk about a couple others that are really raising their game, and Rory Peterson, going into his senior year, really providing a huge spark and huge energy for their line with, it's now Rory Peterson, Jessie Swick, and Cassie Lean. So they have been a very, very dominant line for us in just terms of their energy and getting on teams. So they've been a pain in the butt on the ice. And in the end, if you can be a pain in the butt, you're going to create offensive opportunities. So,
we talked. I mentioned in the first segment about Senior Day, and you've got a number of seniors on your squad that certainly are going to be missed when they leave. But talk a little bit about the importance that they've had, not only on the ice but off the ice as well.
This senior group kind of hold a special place in my heart. This is actually the first class that I actually recruited, so I've gotten to know them from their senior year in high school all the way through, and not to take away from our previous senior classes, but this senior class is definitely a leadership group. It's been the one group that has always kind of been the go-to that, people just naturally gravitate towards. You look at Mackie Fadden, it's just an all-around great person, a leader, a captain, 2-sport athlete. People just naturally want to be around her, and she's a great person. Katie Letourneau, same thing. Tori Herman, Rory Peterson, McKenna Parent. Just a core group of young ladies that have definitely left an everlasting impression on St. Mary's and our women's hockey team.
I got one that certainly never gets any accolades, And talk a little bit about Haley Jung, your manager, and one of your senior golfers. But the things that she does for your women's hockey team as a manager are pretty impressive.
I don't think it's hit us quite yet, but I don't know how to explain how much we will miss Haley Jung after this year is over. She does so much for our team and our program, especially off the ice. She's always around, ready to kind of do miscellaneous errands and whatnot. She also controls our Twitter and social media pages, and she is the one who, just kind of does all the behind the scenes work that kind of takes a huge load off our plates. And she is, again, another fantastic person. Will do anything you ask of her, and is the most genuinely nice person I've ever met. So you're 100% right in the sense that she doesn't show up on the score sheets or the stat sheets or anything like that, but definitely a very integral part of what we do at St. Mary's and our women's hockey team, and she will be missed very much.
I just want to say, if I ever can't get to a game, I just have to go on to Twitter and go to St. Mary's Women's Hockey, and she has updates throughout the game, never fails.
All right, well, if we get a bunch of followers after this, it's SMUMNW Hockey. That is our Twitter handle.
Absolutely.
And Haley Jung is all over that.
Let's bring it back to the ice now. 4 games left. Unlike the men, you don't have a bye, so you've got St. Ben's this weekend, and then you've got St. Kate's next weekend. 3 of the 4 on the road. Talk a little bit about where you're at and what you need to do these last 4 games.
We boil it down for our team to make it very simple. We have to win. We feel as a coaching staff that if we don't win all 4 games, we're out. Obviously anything can happen. Upsets, win, whatever. But we feel like we need 4 wins. If we don't get 4 wins, we might as well. Obviously we're going to try to win our last 3, but we need 4 wins and then let the chips fall where they may. Like we talked about, we had a couple missed opportunities early on. Losing to Hamlin early in January. Losing out on a point to Augsburg when they tied with 8 seconds left. Losing out on an extra point with Gustavus, scoring with 45 seconds left. Just a couple of points that we left on the board that, now if we get those 4 points, we're hitting a different tune. We're talking about something a lot different. So it's unfortunate we put ourselves in this situation, but, I've been very pleased with the way we played most recently. So I know if anybody's up for the challenge of winning 4 games in a row, it's this group of young ladies. So.
And I would imagine, too, that that's where you rely on the large number of seniors and their mental toughness to kind of help the rest of the team come through here.
Very much so. And also looking for those young kids to step up. At some point, those seniors aren't going to be around anymore. And there's no better time than the present to get someone to step up and put a huge goal in the net. And like I said, we've been pretty happy with all of our lines and all our defensemen kind of playing up to their capabilities and beyond. So hopefully that we continue to kind of step up and find that extra gear and find the next step and really bring St. Mary's and our women's hockey team into a new level.
Yep.
Greg, can you talk a little bit more in terms of senior day? I had mentioned in the first segment it's kind of bittersweet. You've been that senior. You've gone through this as a player and as a coach. Put your pads back on and be that player and just tell us kind of what that day is like, because it is a culmination of not only college but your entire hockey career.
About 30 seconds.
Yep, it is very emotional. Getting to strap them on for the last time, and you just try to keep your mind straight and making sure that you're kind of doing what you need to do. And you got to remember you have a game to play. And fortunately for us, we know that this game's a big one. So hopefully we, as much as it's emotional, we got to put that to the side and make sure that we take care of business first.
All right, Greg Moore, women's hockey assistant coach. Thanks so much. Good luck against St. Ben's this weekend and St. Kate's next week.
Thank you.
All right, stay tuned here to HBC TV 25. When we come back on the Cardinals Nest, it'll be our student athlete spotlight. Nathan Voller will sit down with softball player Katie Krull here on HBC.
We chose HBC because they're a local company. They have a big audience in Winona, which is the geographic group that we're looking for. Mel is very easy to work with. She's genuinely concerned about how our money is being spent, and she does everything she can to make sure we get the most for our money. She takes care of us. So whenever there's a problem, which is rarely, I know that I can go to her and she's going to take care of it.
To see how HBC advertising can help your company, call Melanie at 507-474-5802. Go beyond entertainment with HBC GigaWorld and get the broadband experience. Video chat without buffering. Stream your favorite shows and movies with TV to go. Dominate your online games and more with gigabit internet speeds. Watch over 300 video channels, including high definition, sports, HBO, Cinemax Stars Plus, Encore Showtime, and more. Call friends and family with reliable, crystal clear, unlimited local and domestic long distance phone service. Experience broadband the way it's meant to be with HBC GigaWorld. Visit hbci.com to get started today.
And we're back to wrap things up here on the Cardinals Nest on HBC. And before we go, it's time for our Student Athlete Spotlight. And this week, Nathan Voller sits down with
the Cardinals softball
player Katie Krull. So thanks for watching the Cardinals Nest here on HBC.
The Cardinals softball team is soon going to be starting of spring training in Florida with their first matchup on February 24th against Linden State College. And one of the senior athletes is Katie Krull, a journalism major from Rochester, Minnesota, and who was also the focus of this week's Student Athlete Spotlight.
So I actually started a little bit later in my career. Most people have been playing since they were like 10 and could hold a glove and a bat. I started when I was a sophomore in high school. I was playing tennis a lot, but I just needed another sport that I wasn't just always playing tennis. And my mom was really good at softball, so I decided to play. I play mostly outfield. I've torn both my ACLs though, so when I first came here in high school, I kind of went to third, but I'd never played infield before, so I wasn't the most comfortable there, and I wasn't really the best at it compared to a couple people that have been in third place for the whole life. The best moment of my life when I hit my walk-off home run. We were like in the bottom of the 8th, down by 1, and they pinched me in the hit, but I had, like, when they wrote the newspaper article the next day, they called me Kirk Gibson, so that was just really fun and exciting, I guess. But then the really funny thing is we made it to like the next game afterwards, and the next game I played 2 players that are on the St. Mary's team now, and they beat us, but it was just like funny because we knew each other from that sense. Probably one of my closer friends on the team is one of our manager, Jessica Ainley. She actually kind of gave me the confidence to come out for the sport because when we were freshmen, we were a little down in numbers, and I was playing tennis at the time, and tennis and softball in college are in the same season, even though in high school they're not typically. So what ended up happening was I asked if I could play, and she was the one who was like, coaches are super nice, and they'll, hear you out, so go ahead and go for that one. I'm a journalism major right now at St. Mary's, and I have been writing for the newspaper since I first came here, and I was actually editor for a couple years, but when things got busy with sports, I decided to step back and take a little bit of a lesser role. And I've always been really set on print journalism, but over the last, I feel just like last semester, I got introduced to a lot of courses here, upper division courses at St. Mary's that involve just motion design, graphic design, and just like being behind a camera. And I actually really like it, and I'm pretty decent at it. And my internship right now actually has me work a lot with cameras and just shooting and editing video, and I really like that aspect of journalism too, so it's really opened the door for me. It's just amazing here. There's such a tight-knit community, and I think that was something that I really didn't want to fall into when I was looking for colleges. I didn't want to fall into being a number at a big university. I really wanted people to know who I was, and just like, it just makes it so much more approachable that when I go to class and I can know at least one person in the class just because of the community of the college. I mean, I know we all kind of gripe about having to take 4 years of LCT, but I remember my freshman LCT year, I still talk to every single person in that class. We're not close, but that class brought us a little friendship, and I can see them in classes, or I can see them in the hallway, and we could have an actual real conversation. I've always wanted to be a D1 coach, and the St. Mary's head coach, Jen Miller, is constantly helping me, giving me tips. She's helped me with practice plans before, and just really just setting me up for a career to be a strong, female in the workforce, as well as, being the best softball player I can be, and just the dedication everyone puts in is just unbeatable. I feel like St. Mary's just has this culture that everyone should aspire to have.